Yes, this is going to be our first module, and this first module is on one of the main aspects of our session. Our session in Yerevan is going to be very much focused on our well-being, on understanding welfare and putting that first. In UIP, we have an incredible organization where we have so many amazing priorities and we grow in so many different ways. And we don't always take into account our welfare. So that's what this module is going to be about. Now, the format of this module isn't just going to be me here talking about health this, health that, mental stuff. Instead, it's going to be very much you writing things down, thinking, and us having open discussions. So I'll give you 2 minutes to quickly find a pen and paper or something to kind of write things down on. If it's your phone, it's a lot easier if it's pen and paper because it's easier to jot down notes, but make sure you do have something you can write something down on. Even if you're watching on YouTube now, do grab pen and paper and make sure you can start jotting stuff down. And once you do have, I will start to share my screen. Let's see. How do I play? Here we go. So just double checking. Everyone sees the screen? Perfecto. Cool. So welcome to this first module on mental wellness in UIP. How we're going to start off with is we're going to start off with a little exercise. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a random description of a whole bunch of stuff that we do in our UIP sessions. And what I want for you to do is to put your mental wellness glasses on. By this, what I mean is that just like if I say, don't think about elephant, don't think about elephant, think of an animal, you're going to think about an elephant. If we have a certain perspective in our mind, it allows us to focus on certain elements of what's being talked about. And the element that I want you to focus on is understanding how is somebody going to feel in terms of their mental state, in terms of potential stress, potential anxiety, potential positive states as well. So anything that I'm going to talk about, what I want you to do is to grab your pen and paper and just jot down notes about the first thing that comes into your mind about what you hear. So I'm going to go step by step through different elements of an EYP session. And for this to work, I'd like you to write down certain elements that come into your mind, but in specifically focusing on this mental wellness perspective. And then we can open up for a discussion, and it's going to allow us to talk about some really nice things. So first of all, when we go to a session, there is a whole lot of us, so many people. In Yerevan, there's going to be more than 300 people from probably more than 35, 40 different countries all coming together. There is a lot of people. Some of them I know, most of them I probably don't know, and suddenly we're all here together to spend a lot of time. We do a lot of stuff. There are so many different things that we do in this period of time, and we do it for quite a long time. We're not coming together just for an hour or two or for a day. We actually do tend to come together 3, maybe 4 days in a row, sometimes, like in our session, up to like 7 to 10 days for an event itself. It's a long amount of time that we're spending together with the same people throughout that whole time. We work with strangers. The people that suddenly we're placed in the committee with, we've probably never met them before. And now all of my work has to be spent with these individuals here. We have a lot of contact very early on, doing very weird games. Games that on a normal social level would not be accepted. But we seem to do lots of these kind of stuff in EYP, and we say this is accepted and you should feel okay. We are told to constantly blindly trust both the process that we work in. So yes, you're playing this activity, trust it, the activity work. We're doing lots of team building, there's a purpose behind this, just trust it. And we have to blindly trust each other. These strangers that I've never met before, I suddenly have to literally, in these cases, blindly trust them. And within a very short period of time, I'm expected to feel very close to that team. I'm meant to have this vibe, these strong energies, this true connection and belonging to my team. We have political policy discussions in a much more academic setting than we're used to. I may have never had these kind of policy discussions, but now I'm talking about actually thinking which institutions should do what and what is the outcome of this policy, how do I bring this into place, etc. These are kind of conversations I am not usually exposed to, and here I'm expected to do so. Any idea that I come out with is suddenly open for everyone to be able to judge, to disagree with, to congratulate me on. Anything I write or say is out there in the open for others. And on top of that, there's some people I recognize in this committee that are coming out with just so many facts and there's so much knowledge. I probably haven't met people who've got as much knowledge as some of these people I meet here. They're almost like a walking, talking encyclopedia. Whenever we start working on all of this resolutions and stuff together, we then have to phrase this in very academic English and make sure everything is perfect and to our highest standards, because that is what we're going to be judged upon. We work with constant deadlines and time limits. We're told, okay, you have 20 minutes to finish that discussion. You only have 5 minutes. It doesn't matter where you get to. You have 5 minutes. You need to finish. We constantly set these deadlines every single time we work. We have really influential people who come over to us and tell us how important it is, the work that we're doing, and how much we need to focus on this. We deliver speeches in front of hundreds of people at times. This kind of public speaking in front of everyone, not just with our ideas are to be judged, but in order to actually speak for a period of time in front of all of these people. And as soon as we get tired, we do some kind of energizer to wake ourselves up, so we do not fall back asleep. And that's just the delegates. What about all of us as officials who take on roles and responsibilities way, way beyond what we've ever been used to outside of EYP? We have to carry this session baggage way, way more than just a 3, 4, or maybe 7-day session. We're carrying it potentially for years at a time, or at least a good half a year or a few months that we are carrying the session with us. That is a lot. So what I'd like to do now is using the maybe hand thing, maybe if Miriam can give us a hand and try to kind of help, not monitor, but moderate this. I'd love to kind of open up for a few individuals who'd like to share certain kind of maybe patterns or certain things that you kind of wrote down or ideas that were triggered by what you wrote.
Just one technical thing. So because I am like the owner of this conference, I cannot raise my hand. So, but everyone else, I think, should be able to do that. It's on the panel on the top right under the participants, and then it should be like raise hand. It's like a blue sign. Apart, if you can't do that, just unmute yourself. Anyone wants to speak? Nathan, could you maybe repeat your question just in case?
So as I was going through those different slides, there may have been maybe different memories, maybe different ideas, maybe different feelings that kind of came up for you in sense of what is happening in terms of wellness here. Now we can kind of open up and maybe share some of those ideas or thoughts or feelings that you wrote down.
Okay, we have Olga who raised her hand. I would say just unmute yourself and speak up. Um,
Do you hear me?
yeah.
So I kind of missed the first part of your presentation, but what I generally was noticing as a delegate is that when you miss out on those half an hour interactions at 3 o'clock in the morning, you feel like crap about yourself, and you kind of like when you miss out on something, you feel so bad. But at the same time, when you miss out on sleep, and like when you don't really care about your own well-being, you're not actually able to socialize and do your best. So I feel like there's this pressure, as you've said, to do more, be more, not sleep, but nobody's really talking about how this impacting us after we haven't slept for 2 days, or after we have slept for only 2 hours in 24 hours. You know what I mean. So yes, there's definitely this pressure, and I definitely didn't feel comfortable with this, especially when I was chair, and when the delegates were coming in the morning and trying to stay awake, and it wasn't well both for them and for me. So that's it.
Thank you so much for raising that point, Olga. 100%, 100% behind you on that. You're definitely right. There is this whole idea of inside EYP, we don't sleep because there's so much things to do. There's this FOMO, this fear of missing out, these incredible conversations, these parties. There's everything that's constantly happening. And so if you're asleep, then you're just doing less. But then the next day, like you said, it's like you're dragging around your body as opposed to actually being with yourself and continuing. On that topic, is there anyone else who has either an opinion or an example, or maybe of a time when they're in a session and they've kind of really started to feel the impacts of our issues with sleep?
I mean, I could say from my experience, sometimes for me, I would say my body can really be strong during the session. I feel like it pulls all the power, all the energy it has been accumulating for years to survive the 5 days, and I'm going strong during this, like, during the session days. But I feel like every time the session is over, my brain and my body are just like, finally, we can relax. And that's when I feel very vulnerable when it comes to my immunity. So I usually get sick right away after the session. I usually get a cold right away, and then I go to sleep and I don't hear 100 of alarms because I'm so sleep deprived. So I usually have to take 2-3 days after the session to get back on track. That's how long for me it takes to go like transition into real life. But in the same time, I got used to this. So I'm treating this like as a normal thing, because I realized that I feel like this pressure that I need to give my everything while I'm at the session. I need to just, put all the energy and love I have, and then I can, after the session, like renovate myself and reincarnate. So yeah, that's my experience usually.
Yeah, also to add something to what you just said, it's that, like, I think that this is the problem, the fact that we actually consider this as normal, because it's true that naturally everyone tries to give his best and to take the best from the opportunity that they have being at the session. And then it just like sleep out from our mind the fact that, like, maybe being at the session, it's not so good for our mental and physical well-being, and it's just okay to be back and to be completely tired, to be back with your exams, to be not on track with your studies and the rest of your life, that you kind of completely forget for those 5 to 10 days of fun work and the amazing experience. But I think that this is the thing that we need to tackle in a way, the fact to make clear that this is not normal.
I totally agree with that. Like, hi, I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, but I've been listening to the last points. And for me, I don't know if it has happened to any other person, but for me, I have always been so surprised how well my body or I can resist at EYP sessions. And then I don't know, I feel kind of like a little bit bad when I come back kind of like to normal life. And then I don't know, I'm active in projects or in school or doing something else, and I am very surprised, like, why can I not perform like, you know, the same way? Like, I know I can do this much amount of work, but you know, I don't know, for me it creates this confusion that if I know I can do it, let's say in a session, and then I try to bring the same kind of like energy or rhythm to my everyday life, I notice that it doesn't work. And then it creates a little bit of confusion. I asked myself, like, why can't you do it? So I don't know, I guess that I'm maybe a little bit happy to hear that, you know, maybe it's not that healthy, and maybe that's why maybe at some point I cannot do it in that way.
Thanks so much for sharing, guys. Have other people got examples of? So here, I guess what we're talking about is almost the sense that in EYP sometimes we can get this extra adrenaline that while we're there, at least there can be this like extra boost that I almost become like a superhuman. I don't need sleep, I don't need this, and I can just keep powering forward. And sometimes I can not even look at the effects of what it's having on my body and potentially only feel it afterwards. And in other situations, I realized, well, inside UIP, it didn't necessarily teach me how I could deal with a huge workload. It just put me in an artificial space where I managed to at that point. Have other people got examples of how you felt with this kind of workload, either during the session, before the session, or after the session?
Sorry, Nathan, can you please repeat the question? I didn't get it.
So have other people got examples of the way that they've kind of dealt with everything that's happened at UIP, whether it's before the session, during the session, after the session? As an example, as Marianne pointed out, that for her is that during the session she gets this huge buzz. She becomes a superhuman, and then after the session can become super ill. It's like but her body borrowed everything from after the session and brought it into the session itself and kind of used itself too much. Has someone got maybe another way that they've experienced the way they've worked at sessions?
No, thank you. Like, it's not a very useful contribution, but like for me, it's basically the same. That like before the session, I try to take my time to manage my life and the work that I have to do for the session. Then when I go to the session, everything else disappears, and I become Wonder Woman. As you said, concerning everything is connected to EYP, and then it's completely like coming back to life, being dead for 2 or 3 days, and then trying to, let's say, resurrect from it and catch up with all the work that has been left behind.
I can see that Jordan and Olga are raising their hands as well. So I would say that since it's not that many of us, you can just unmute yourself and feel free to speak if you have something to say. So Jordan, for example.
Okay, so hi. I had a really similar experience with being completely and utterly dead after the session, but it wasn't really physical, it was more mental. So I came back from a really, really long session and I was kind of spaced out, and then I couldn't really think or really get my thoughts in process. And I didn't know how to really act with it, and my family was a bit shocked how I came back from it, but I think the experience shows you somehow that it is a really, really taxing thing, but if you know how to deal with it mentally, I think it's pretty much fine. I don't know if that really helped or anything, but that's how I've dealt with it.
For me, it's kind of hard back to normalize. So, I have this situation with Maria. I literally fall ill after the first day back home. But also with university, it's kind of everything loses its brightness, and I kind of lose interest in everything. So for me, it takes like a week to get back to the usual workload. And also because I try to do everything beforehand, before the session, like plan the workload I'll have after and try to get it done after the session. Although I have like all my assignments in place, I still forget what's going on. And yeah, for me it takes time. Usually it even takes time for me to get back talking with my friends, because I don't know, for some reason I feel so overwhelmed after the session that I really don't feel need to talk to anybody else, even if those people are family or friends and they're genuinely interested to find out how the session went, etc. So this was kind of something I didn't know how to deal with. And yeah, I'd really like to hear some opinions about it on this webinar from you guys.
I really, really love this first point we've covered. So this first point we've covered is about how either physically or mentally during the session, I can put a lot in. And then after the session, the consequences it has. It could be the physical side of saying, I've become superhuman, then afterwards I can feel ill. My immunity system has kind of saying, okay, you took a lot too much from me, I'm now giving up. Or on the other hand, it can definitely be in this mental state to say, I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of presence, a lot of social interaction. And then when I head back home, things may not seem as rosy. Things may seem more distant from me, more spaced out. This could be my mental state is trying to recover, or my physical state definitely trying to recover. So that's the first really, really great important point that you guys have pointed out. The second that we can have a look at during the session itself is, oh, sorry, was someone, oh, hey. A second that we were pointing out here, sorry, Sean, just put your microphone on mute. Perfect. Awesome. Cool. So a second one here for us would be to say that if for delegates when they come together, oh, sorry, John, just put your microphone on mute, just on the, perfect. Awesome. Cool. So when these delegates will come together, they're going to start working with complete strangers. Those questions come into their mind. Who are these people? What if I don't become friends with them? How do I know I can trust them? There's this level of anxiety that can arise. We straight away put them into moments of contact. We talk about comfort zones, but what if we're going beyond someone's comfort zone and don't realize it? What if we're so much in this momentum of we're doing things, and we're pushing them too fast? Here, for the delegate, we can have all of this anxiety starting to come up. They then have to trust blindly other people. Once again, this idea of anxiety building up. There is a new social norm that we've put in place, which is to say, this is the way to do things. You must trust it. You are expected to feel as this team. What if that delegate doesn't feel a part of that team? So I'd love to open up this part of the conversation as well. Is if you think yourself, if you think either in the perspective of a delegate now, or if you try to think about back when you were a delegate, and think of potential stress or anxiety you could feel in different parts of the sessions, and maybe why did you feel them, or why could a delegate feel them? I'd love to open up that conversation.
So I see that Olga has her hand up. Is it just because you forgot to put it down, lower it, or is it for this question?
I think maybe it's because I forgot to put it down.
Okay.
Sorry. But I do have something to say right now, as I think of it. I had feedback from my delegate about 2 months ago. So it was a regional session, and only 3 days of the session with delegates. So she liked everything, but the only thing that was stressing her out a bit was this strict and transition from team building fun date to this committee work when you suddenly have to think a lot, express your ideas, and you just met these people. Like, it's impossible to feel comfortable with them just in one day. So she felt like she needed a bit more time or some things to help her transition from the fun, cool day of team building to the more rigorous committee work day.
Another part during which, like, it's not like a part, another situation in which delegates can feel anxiety is how you, Nathan, like suggested in a way, is like all the social part. So it's not just, I feel pressured to be out from my room during the night because I need to meet people and have connections with them, but also within the committee, because as we have in the team of the officials, in my opinion, we have these pressure, this anxiety to need to feel close to the others, to create new friendships, to be connected with everyone. And this is something that can really put down a person that do wants to have this but cannot. And everyone else is expecting him or her to do it, to feel that, and to behave in a certain way accordingly.
I would also add about my experience, both as delegate and as an official. Very often, what happens is you might have amazing people who you really click with and you get along with, and you just feel so comfortable, as if you knew them forever. And then this session usually goes by as such a pleasant experience. But very often, you also have sessions when you just don't click with people because like the chemistry is just not right, and it's nothing wrong with you or with them, but it just somehow, like, as people, you don't work out together. And very often these kind of sessions where you're surrounded by people who don't feel your vibe, that's when I feel like more of us are feeling really insecure about ourselves and like, what's wrong with us? Why don't we get along with them? And that can bring so much stress and social anxiety. And I think after these kind of sessions, you feel so mentally exhausted that very often you start to just, first of all, question yourself and then become very stressed. But in the end, I would say it's also a good learning experience, but it's definitely very mentally stressful. So sessions where you don't really get along with people.
Yeah, I would kind of like to expand on Mariam's point. Like, especially this has been personally for me, especially as a chairperson or as a member of the officials team, kind of like stressing, because it often like comes off to you as a chairperson that you are kind of being evaluated for your performance, and your impact on the session is literally in the evaluation thing. Actual like impact of my behavior in this session, like how is the board gonna view me, how is this gonna affect the like experience of other people if I just don't get along with like members of my church team, for example.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks so much for pointing that part out, Joel, which is the fact that here we've mainly been thinking as a delegate, and partly us EYPers in general draining ourselves in a session. But something that you point out, which is extremely relevant, is that us as officials, we are taking on these really, really important roles, and we are being judged while we're in them. Each one of us, we're always kind of judging each other. And within EYP, like you said, we have this very formality of the board actually evaluating the chairs, the editor evaluating the media team members, the head organizer evaluating the organizers. We're literally under a microscope in this. So all the anxiety that can bring up of, is the action I'm doing having the right impact? Should I be doing it this way? Should I not? And a lot of this can really take away in the way that we want to try to work within a positive mindset. So thanks so much for bringing that up. So far, what we've covered is we've talked about how an EYP session can be incredibly mentally and physically taxing. It can drive a lot of that from us. And specifically, we've kind of picked on certain things that can drive that taxation, that can drive that kind of like stealing of our energy. One of them is this idea of FOMO, the fear of missing out. If I fear that I'm missing out on lots of things, I'm going to want to stay up much later and be involved in everything, and that is a lot. Another thing could be if I just don't click with the people around me, I'm going to put so much more effort and stress into thinking, okay, why isn't this happening? I should feel amazing. This EYP experience should be the way it normally is, and if it's not, what's happening? That can be extremely draining. And us realizing that we're being evaluated under a microscope, being judged, and if we can feel from superiors that we are being looked down upon in the sense of, I am judging you, that can feel incredibly taxing. So here we've already highlighted 3 very important areas in which could make us feel more mentally and physically drained after a session. Tigan, did you? I think, Tigan, did you try to mention something there? Maybe not. Cool. So, yeah, speaking of Tigan, what I like us to think about at the moment is I like us to have a few different discussions as well of looking at exactly what we're talking about, but through the lens of specific roles. So if you think about, you are inside a chairs team. So we do this for other roles as well. But if you're a part of the chairs team, thinking about the impact that you could have on others. So the mental, like how much mental energy are you going to add or drain on others? What could be different things that somebody in the chairperson does that could potentially be more draining for others around them? Has anybody got any examples? So as a chairperson, what are different things that you may have done or could happen in which would have a more negative effect in terms of the mental welfare of others around them?
Okay, I would say that sometimes what happens with chairs is that we sometimes forget to about the process part, and we're so focused on the product that we just keep pushing forward without really paying attention to more important things like people being actually physically okay and mentally okay. And this pressure that sometimes chairs put on the delegates, or even within their team itself, because we're mostly focused on ourselves and like we're telling about, oh, how my committee is going. And sometimes it also might create a pressure within the chair's team when you were saying like, oh, I'm already done with the OCs, and then the other chair might be trying to like compare themselves and feel a little bit down. So I would say that the pressure that we create for ourselves and for our committee is usually what distracts us from focusing on keeping them healthy.
Something else that the chairs might do without even noticing is just like setting the wrong example, just tiring themselves out completely. And the delegates would see them like out all the time and working late to plan and everything. They would take the chair as a of how should behave at the session, and this can put even more pressure on them to actually be there all the time.
Yeah, I think those are 2 really important points that definitely work together. So on the one hand, a chairperson can put lots of pressure on themselves, and through the way they communicate can also put pressure on those around them. And as they're putting all this pressure on themselves, and as they're starting to work themselves really hard and not really looking after their own welfare, if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not doing everything correctly, then this is the role model I'm giving to delegates. Delegates look up to chairpersons and saying, you are the ideal person. This is who I want to become. There's so much role modeling that comes from that chairperson. So definitely, if we're giving that overworkingness as our example, that isn't something that's going to have that positive impact. So 100%. How many people here? Feel free just to kind of give a wave, if give a wave or give a thumbs up if this applies to you. But how many of you have either made your delegates skip a coffee break or have to work through their coffee break or lunch? Almost every time for me. No? Hey, I see one or two people like, no, that's sacred time. Maybe Joel, do you want to tell us maybe a little bit why you feel it's sacred time for them?
I would love to, but I have to run this for a second. My train is here.
No problem.
Have a nice train.
You go for it. Consider that.
So just out of curiosity, Joel, are you using Zoom from your phone?
So, like,
okay, sorry.
So does somebody else either? Oh, sorry. Yep. Go ahead. Oh, does somebody else want to share their point of view on this? If we think about, let's say, coffee breaks or lunch, I know myself. So many times I have asked my delegates. I've said, "Okay, cool. There's a coffee break, but actually, Olga's, could we have the coffee break in the committee room? Just because we're running behind what we do need to do." I have done that. I don't know how many times. I say, "Cool. Lunchtime. During lunch, what I'd love you guys to discuss is X, Y, Z." Has anybody here who does that a lot, who maybe definitely doesn't do that, who wants to kind of share their opinion with us?
I guess I have only chaired twice, and the first one was good, but the second one was even better. And one of the things that I noticed was when the second time that I was chairing, I had this committee that was doing a fantastic job. It was just a regional session, so it was just only one day. And my committee was doing just so good during the whole day, and they were having so great ideas. But almost at the end of the day, they were having so much trouble kind of putting their ideas together. And then we really had to leave the school, and like almost all the other committees were ready, and I struggled so much between trying to still be this kind of like, you know, cool chair that they would like and that they would all have like a good time with. But then on the other hand, I kind of, you know, was like pressing like, hey, you have to get it done. And I really struggle kind of like finding this balance between not kind of like ruining their experience in the way that they have been having such a good flow during the whole day, but on the other hand, how can they really land their ideas and just get it done? So I don't know, I felt that at some point during that time that I was chairing, I really start putting like a lot of pressure and like, okay, but just get me your point, or just tell me what on earth you want to do so that I later can put it into the resolution. And luckily, like everything went like so good, and I like kind of like phrase what they wanted to say. And then we had this group where I asked them like, hey, is this guys what you wanted to say? Do you approve? And then all of them were like, yes, we approve. But I don't know, I felt that at some point it was a problem for me, like how to not ruin their experience, but allowing them to, you know, keep figuring out what they are learning and keep allowing them to develop and enjoy the session to the best that they can.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Jade. I think that's a perfect example that exactly explains what we're talking about. Perfect. Thanks. And let's think about the Orga team. Has somebody got an example of something that an Orga might do that could put pressure on, cause stress, cause anxiety, or have some kind of negative impact on the others around them.
Okay, I am sorry for going again. I think the problem that happens with the Orga team usually has to do with the fact that Orgas work the hardest. Let's be real. And because of the fact that they are probably the most sleep deprived and the most hardworking, they're also the most vulnerable when it comes to like irritation, and when it comes to very like small tasks or someone asking them to do things. It could happen potentially that organizers would react harshly because of the fact that they have been through so much of hardship during the session already, and they just wouldn't have enough of energy to respond like in a friendly manner. But of course it doesn't happen all the time, but that can in a way affect, because when someone is getting like told off by the organizer, they would start like, oh, I got this organizer shouting at me, and then it creates a little bit of drama, and I hate when it happens, but it happens. And that, like, this negative energy is kind of starting to go in circles, and people just pass it from one person to another. And yeah, just because of the fact that organizers sometimes don't have the time and energy to just explain and have a more constructive way of communicating, that could potentially happen from my experience.
Perfect. Excellent point. So if we think about the chairperson, we said, well, we want, if they, we talked about role modeling wellness. We said, okay, if they take care of themselves, then other people can look up to them and also take care of themselves. This is how we can role model it to delegates. And then with the augurs, here we're talking about, well, if you're not looking after yourself, or if you're not given the ability to look after yourself, then the impact on others is immediate. I'm saying it's very quick to get irritated, it's very quick to snap back at others. And there can be this negative energy that comes out of us because we're not taking care of ourselves in that manner. So 100%. So for chairs, we talked about more on the kind of role modeling side, and augurs, it's so fundamental to look after oneself, because we are going to be like the keepers of this energy for this session. Whenever we need something, one thing or another to happen, it could be taken in a negative way if I'm not looking after myself in that respect. So excellent, Miriam. And then last one here, media team. So if I give an example, so many of us who've worked in media teams may have had, I don't know, a deadline that's at 3 o'clock in the morning, or given a deadline at 7 a.m. or something, one of these kind of ridiculous deadlines of when to hand in a piece of work. When we're given that kind of deadline, is setting the expectation of, I want you to work until that time. So if I'm given the deadline, okay, 3 o'clock in the morning, something has been in, that's already setting the bar to say the norm is for you to work until 3 in the morning. Then after that 3 in the morning, it's socialized time. And then you still got to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning because we have breakfast waiting for you. So within each one of these roles, we can start to see how we could impact others through more or less focusing on mental wellness. So to bring our module kind of towards its end, is to sum up what our discussion has been about. Wasn't this is the 10 different methods of taking care of yourself, Wellness 101. Instead, what we're doing is we're just opening up the conversation. We're saying, let's look at what we take for granted and just look with a different perspective and understand different impacts. Maybe you felt something, but you thought, I don't know if I really feel this. But when you hear somebody else say it, it's kind of the same. Well, I also feel that way. For me, this is really taxing. For me, sometimes I do want to go to bed early, but I don't feel I'm able to. for me, I don't always feel confident with a whole room of strangers and working this fast. Whenever we can start to open up these kind of conversations, then we're going to be on the right path to finding our solutions. So our discussion together was understanding people in different aspects. And the one you can walk away with is to say, well, what about you? How am I going to make sure, if you're coming to Yerevan, let's say between now and Yerevan, how are you going to make sure to take care of your wellness? Is there somebody in the session who could help you? If there's somebody you need a conversation with, how can you open that dialogue? If you're not coming to Yerevan, but you go into another event, whether it's EYP or non-EYP, is understanding, well, how are things impacting you and how are you impacting others? So today isn't a 101 on how to do everything, but we just want to open this dialogue so that way during our session, we can take wellness seriously in a way that maybe it hasn't been done before. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us for almost an hour online, talking to either your phone or your computer in this way. Thank you for all those who shared, who inputted, and the more you keep sharing like this throughout our webinars, the more you're going to learn. And thanks to everyone who's now watching on YouTube, I guess, as well.